what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Weekly Cheddar. Jake Shavink here. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy first joint Packers practice day, which was super fun. We got Chris, Pete, Prince Capasason all coming in saying hello early on. Was an interesting day of practice, of course. A lot of notes for sure, and we can go through those. Obviously, we're going to do some questions, of course. Love the Q&A portion of this. That goes nowhere. Love when you guys kind of get to drive stuff, which is always fun. So we'll be doing that, a lot of that tonight. Was just going to checked in with the other PTA folks to see if they were going to potentially pop in. Nobody said anything about that, so I think they're all going to kind of take the night off after their long stream during practice. But we'll kind of just talk about a few things off the top if there's nothing on anyone's mind immediately. I will not forget as well to talk about Pulse of the Fan Base because we're going to do that every show as well. I've got something for that I'm sure everybody will really enjoy. Maybe Matt LaFleur won't enjoy it, but he's not here, so that's okay. But yeah, what's going on, everybody? Prince Capsaicin saying, saw on the Schneidman show, new rule allows you to IR guy before they're cut to 53 with the designation to return. Yeah, the IR designation to return thing, I know they did that in-season thing. I think I forget how long the stint is now when they're put on that. It's like 4 or 6 weeks, I think, when they do that in-season. But that's an interesting little wrinkle. In case someone, of course, gets hurt in these next 2 preseason games. Obviously, a lot of the starters might not see a whole lot of time. We'll see on that front, but that does make things interesting in terms of the 53s. I know Bill Huber put out one recently. I know there was one shared, I think I shared with the group on Monday from Schneidman, I believe, on The Athletic that had, who wasn't in it? Let me go back and check because there were 3. It was Wilson, Ballantyne, and Rochelle were the most notable cuts. I know maybe Rochelle's a little less notable, but he did have a nice first preseason game. We'll see what they're going to do at corner. That's probably one of the more interesting, of course, receivers interesting, running backs interesting. But I do think corner, the number of corners they decide to keep is going to be one of the more interesting storylines over these next couple weeks. So it's 4 games. Okay, that's good to know. But yeah, that's a nice little wrinkle. I'm sure they're not going to do that with Lloyd with it just being a hamstring injury, but you never know. You never know how bad it is. But it sounds like they're pushing for him to get back as soon as possible so they can get some more looks at him in the preseason. We'll see. I imagine we're probably not going to see him this week, but we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, as far as Broncos and Packers joint practice goes, there was certainly plenty to talk about from that. And I think the first thing is obviously they didn't bring their best today, as from what it sounds like. The defensive line, I think, did well. It sounded like from all the reports from Hodkowitz, from Spofford, from Schneidman, from others who were there, it sounded like the defensive line kind of had their way with the Broncos O-line. And I think when you look at, what that O-line is in Denver right now, Garrett Bowles obviously got an extension, but he's, I think, on the final year of his deal at left tackle. He was a first-round pick quite a while ago now. Wow, yeah, it's been a while. 2018 maybe. So him, and I know they signed McGlinchey, right? They signed like Ben Powers. So I wouldn't call their O-line tremendous by any stretch, but I do think, Green Bay kind of took care of business in that department. Sounds like Gary did well, Smith did well, and Egbare did well, which was good. Van Ness, I think, had a few reps where it sounded like, especially I think he was facing the twos sometimes where he was, blowing up plays and getting in the backfield. So it was good to see that defensive line kind of, in my opinion, take care of business against what is a pretty mediocre to below average offensive line in Denver. So it's good to see them do that. They need to take advantage of that on the schedule this year. When I think about it, obviously both Bears games, they're going to have to take, advantage of that offensive line right? Minnesota's interior isn't the best, so they're going to have to take advantage there. What else? Who else on the offensive line? I mean, Tennessee's isn't the best. The Rams is okay in the interior, but they're going to have to take advantage, of what the Rams have at tackle. Arizona's isn't that great. So there's a lot on the schedule where you look at the Packers, Miami, Seattle. So there's going to be a lot of opportunities where it's like you have to take care. This defensive line needs to create that type of pressure, week in and week out, because they're not going to be facing elite offensive lines all the time, and there are going to be weaknesses they're going to have to exploit. It's obviously a little easier with Denver, but it was just nice to see that, like, okay, this is a unit that should be taking advantage of offensive lines like that, and they did that. It sounds like the offensive line didn't do that well, right? I know there were some false starts. I know the right tackle position didn't do particularly well. I know Bonito and Baron Browning and a lot of guys were in the backfield as well. So it was another kind of, checkbox where you would have liked to see that box checked for the Packers offensive line. And I think there's still certainly concerns there. And I think, I know a lot of people bringing up, could they find somebody up, once cuts are going on, and it's possible. I just feel like, they're going to have to go in with what they've got. It's going to be offensive line play. We've kind of talked about it on this show plenty, where it's just most teams don't have excellent offensive line play, so they're going to keep every guy who's got any scrap of potential on their roster, most likely, just because they can't afford to lose guys like that. So there are a lot of offensive lines, a lot of teams that have that situation. So it's just going to be unlikely unless there's a sort of like scheme fit or something they see, Green Bay does, where they see like, oh, this team cut him because he's just not cutting it in their specific scheme, then maybe Green Bay pounces. But I just don't think they're going to get a lot of great opportunities for that. So it pretty much going to roll, I think, into the season with what they have, and it's just going to have to be, focus on some guys taking some steps forward. Jordan Morgan playing right guard is going to be key, of course. Sean Ryan wearing a lot of hats. Monk also has worn a few hats already this training camp and preseason already. So having those two guys will be important to see them take steps. And it's obviously going to be important that, Walker and Tom stay healthy because there's just it gets a little dicey. I think Jordan Morgan obviously could step in and play left tackle. I think he can do just fine out there. I don't think there's any problem with that, but it just seems like from the practices, the defensive lines clearly made their presence known, especially off the edge. What's going on, Coach Hewlin? Glad to see that you made it. Yeah, usually I'm live at like 8:30 on Fridays, and usually kind of Clayton's wraps up, and so wanted to have something on the nightcap for all the PTA folks who kind of go to both places. Other than that, it seemed like they ran the ball really well with Josh Jacobs today. And there was someone at the camp, I think it was Broncos Allegiance covering them, was like, man, Jacobs could have run for like 200 yards today, is what was said. And that's really encouraging. Again, the Broncos, do they have the best interior defensive line? No. Do they have the best linebackers? No. Linebackers can hit hard. I know someone, I think it might have been Singleton who hit Jacobs pretty good, and everybody said they could hear the pop from the sidelines. But it sounded like they ran the ball well with Jacobs, and Jacobs was kind of just having a field day out there. That's exciting to see. That's another kind of like, can you take care of business? We signed you to a pretty decent deal. So that's at least good to see. But yeah, I don't know. There's a couple other things I think observation-wise where it just feels like, they just haven't shown up well in these, and Coach Hewlin kind of painting it as well. Last year's joint practice against the Saints. And I think even last year, right, you kind of look at that and you go, well, these guys haven't spent a lot of time together, right? And so it was Love's first year doing stuff. Wicks and Reed were first years. Dobbs and Watson were second-year guys. They had so many young players, and they still have young players. But it is a little maybe more concerning for the offense this go-round because they've had more reps together than that Saints practice. But, some days you just show up and you don't have it. And it sounded like the offense didn't quite have it. I know Wicks made some plays for sure. I know Musgrave made a few plays. Love found him in the red zone for a touchdown. But it sounded like the red zone stuff didn't go super well. And this, I think, brings me to somebody brought this up And I thought it was a really, really good point, and I'm going to try and find it here as we go through, because I really agree with what he's saying. And man, he's got to be in here. So there we go. Because he made a good point about this, and I just feel like it's something where this is here we go. It's something that I think we have to take into account at the very least, just because it's something where this is what happens when you're still a younger team, right? Wendell Ferrer, who does great stuff on A to Z Sports, and so, growing website, you should definitely check him out. Definitely follow him, Wendell FP. Kind of said, like, when it's game plan heavy, when there's, scheme specific stuff that they like to attack with certain defenses, they like to build that plan out. I don't think they were coming into Denver Broncos joint practice going, hey, let's run this and this and this. We're going to scheme. We're going to attack these certain positions, right? They probably didn't go into this practice talking about that kind of stuff. So, that doesn't help. And the Broncos, I think, are more competent of a defense on the edge and on the back end, because I think they have a lot of talent there, in terms of the corner room, in terms of safeties. Like, I know they lost Simmons, but they've done pretty well on the back end recently in terms of the corners and safeties. So, I think if you are a little more vanilla with a lot of stuff, defenses are going to be able to key in on that. And it seemed like that's what was happening, especially in the passing game. So, I think, and this is the other thing, right? The Broncos have a blue chipper. They have an ace on their defense in Patrick Surtain. And this isn't bad. I'm not saying this is I'm not trying to throw digs at the Packers for this. I'm not saying, this is not me going like, hey, maybe you should go out and get a Lamb or an Ayuk, even though obviously having those guys would be awesome. It'd be super fun, but, fiscally responsible. No, the Packers right now on offense, unless you want to count Jordan Love in this, they don't really have that like blue chip go-to, this is an ace, this is a superstar, we have this guy as the trump card on our offense. Right now they have a lot of, guys in the B- to B+ range, and having a lot of those guys is helpful, because when you are game plan heavy like LaFleur is, when all of that can click at the same time, offensive line, quarterback, receivers, running backs, all of that, then you produce this really, really impressive result. The problem is when the chips are down a little bit, as nice as Romeo Doubs has been, as much as he's been kind of Jordan's favorite guy to go to, Wicks just hasn't had the reps. Reed's still young. Watson's hasn't been healthy as much. They don't have this ace on their team, either with Kraft or Musgrave as well, where they go, okay, we can lean on this guy, right? They kind of have to work their way through a lot of stuff and go, okay, where's the weakness? Let's exploit that with this guy this week. They're just going to be more of that. And LaFleur had obviously talked about that when he was, talking about the whole wide receiver one nonsense, right? That was which he doesn't like, because there's going to be certain games where Watson's going to be more valuable to them. There's going to be certain games where Wicks and Dobbs are going to be more valuable, and Reed's going to be more valuable, and the tight ends are going to be more valuable. So not having that one guy where you go, we can trust him to just go win, does hurt a little bit in these type of practice scenarios where, you're not doing a whole lot in this situation, where you're not like planning to show up and run X, X, and X against this team because they have this. They're going to try certain things, that they've been working on, but they're not going to completely tailor it. So, without this game plan, because I thought it was a good point, I think it shows you that I think, this is probably what contributed a little bit to the struggles today. And I think on the flip side, if you want to go to it, right, the flip side being, this defense is young, for one, right, other than kind of Kenny Clark and Preston and Ja and maybe Rashawn Gary. Like, there's a lot of young guys on the back end. McKinney's coming into this system with Halfley. Everybody's adjusting to this new scheme. This kind of feels like last year's offense, right, where it's just kind of a lot of young guys, a lot of guys who have to gel together, and they're probably not going to do it right away. So you see, even a rookie quarterback in Bo Nix kind of tearing them apart a little bit when the defensive line didn't get in the backfield. So I do think that was a big portion of what happened today and why it happened. But I do think like that is going to, be something where you have to think about that, further down the line. Again, not saying that any of these guys, your Dobbs, your Wicks, your Watson, your Reed, your Musgrave, your Kraft can't be that guy at some point. They just aren't at the moment. And that kind of, lends itself to these sort of struggles where you're not building this game plan out for these type of joint practices. We're probably going to see a similar thing happen in the Ravens joint practice, right? I just feel like the Ravens are going to throw a lot at them, right? That defense, I don't think is going to change a whole lot, even though McDonald left. I'm sure McDonald has his disciples in the building that are going to run similar stuff to what McDonald ran last year in Baltimore, and there's probably going to be some issues then. But I think it's going to be good experience. Coach Hewlin says, I'm excited to see how we respond on Sunday. Sounds like I whipped last year. Yeah, so it'll be fun to see how they respond, right? Obviously, Bo Nix is going to play. Give these young guys on the defense a chance to go redeem themselves a little bit against Knicks on Sunday, which will be nice. No doubt about that. Nostalgic says we lost the Niners game at the end because we were without a tier 1 wide receiver. I just think they lost that game because, again, Jordan turned into kind of end-of-game Brett Favre type of deal, trying to go get a field goal. I think they had their struggles after that Aaron Jones run. There should have been 3 there. So I think it wasn't necessarily a tier 1 wide receiver thing. It was just kind of late game execution, and they just didn't do it, and it cost them. And, how many of those opportunities are you going to get? You never know. So it's nice to win in those spots, but it's a good learning experience for a very, very, very young team, who weren't seen as legitimate contenders to start the season, who weren't considered legitimate contenders in October, right before they went on the run. So, I think it was a combination of things after the Aaron Jones run that just kind of fell apart right at the end. And I think they had enough that day to win. They had enough that day to win that game. So Michael Redden, what's going on, says, I want Jordan to see as many different looks as possible, get it on tape. He learns quickly and well. Yeah, the more he sees, the more, whatever Denver threw at him today, whatever the Ravens throw at him next week in joint practice, it's going to be nice to have all of that data for him. No doubt about it. No doubt. So, why not? CD would be awesome. There's no doubt. CD Lamb is incredible. He can move everywhere and do a lot for you offensively. But I think that there's an aggregate that they can build that they have in the room right now that can do a lot of different things. They just, again, you're just going to have to see it materialize over some games. They're still very young. Got 2 guys entering their second year as players. I wish it was easy where guys would just be instant superstars. It just doesn't happen that much. We think it happens more because we focus on, the quarterbacks, right, who become instant stars, and some of the receivers who are drafted in the top 8 who become instant stars. Like, that's what we see. We don't look at the Andrew Thomases from the Giants who had a rough first year and then really 2 elite seasons. We don't think about that as much because we're already on to the next class and the next one. But I do think that they are building the right aggregate room of receivers to have that much value. So, again, would love CeeDee Lamb. Awesome. But budget-friendly receivers are nice to have. So, I don't think there was anything else from practice that I, was itching to talk about other than, of course, they had the little scuffle there, which I don't think was a whole lot going on. But the fact that Matt Orzak got in the scuffle, it was kind of funny. It just really silly stuff that your long snapper is getting into it, especially right after you cut your other long snapper that was in camp. So maybe the Packers long snapper isn't on the roster. Maybe he's not. Maybe we'll see on that front, and they may need a new one in soon. So other than that, I don't think I had a whole lot other than it just kind of stinks to lose to Bo Nix in practice and company from what it sounds like. So didn't love that. Didn't love it. Coach Hewlin, I'm just glad we were getting joint practice reps, unlike the Niners that had to cancel. Yeah, that is true. That it is nice to just kind of playing against, your own defense and your own offense. It's going to get old eventually, right? You're going to feel like you have that down a little bit, and you're going to feel like, okay, I would love to see more wrinkles thrown at me. And that's why I love these joint practices, because you're going to get more wrinkles. You're going to get guys, okay, how does this guy play? How do these guys play? What does this type of receiver do against us, right? What do we have to key in on, when this quarterback can be more mobile, right? Like there's so much that you can get that's really invaluable relative to what you're doing against kind of yourself in camp. So no doubt about it, Coach. Love that. That's a great comment there. Janelle says, are the Packers still planning to rest the starters on Sunday? Yeah, I believe so. I think it's going to be, I think LaFleur said something like a half for Clifford, a half for Pratt, from what it sounded like. And I'm sure pretty much all of the starters are going to be sitting. Obviously I think it's good to have, your young safeties in there playing, even if they're considered starters. Personally, I would still want to have Van Ness in there playing for sure. I know he's not technically a starter, right? You have Preston and Gary, so it's nice to have that where you can go, yeah, Van Ness is a guy we think is going to be a starter, but we'd love to get him more reps. That's nice. It'll be good to have, the interior minus Elton Jenkins still get reps. I don't know if Myers is going to, probably not, but there's a lot of young guys and that are going to benefit by being able to play a little bit longer in this one. So I'm not upset that the starters are not playing, but I know that there's for sure a big group on both sides of the ball not playing. So yes, that's what it is for now. Be interesting to see what the inactives list looks like. I don't know if Cooper or Hopper are going to be potentially, ready to go or not. So I can't wait to see what that's going to look like. But I am excited that the Packers are going to be playing on Sunday night. That's fun. So you kind of get a national look at them. Good look at Bo Nix and what, how the defense is going to look. So I'm excited for a Sunday night preseason game. It just stinks there was no preseason on today. There's just not that much on today, and it would have benefited to have one on. So for those who are here, I want your take on this simply because I love talking about it. Prince Capsaicin says Hope Hopper's ready to get. Yeah, it'd be really nice to get a good look at the linebackers, especially just to see how they're flying around, what how they're reading stuff out, what their instincts look like in coverage, all of that stuff. Just really, especially for a position that I think is super difficult to play in linebacker, is any reps for the young guys are going to be huge. So let's do this. So last time around, which I think was 2 weeks ago now, if I'm not mistaken, we had Pulse of the Fan Base. Going to make sure we're going to keep doing that for sure. Every week, going to make sure that's a thing. I know last week it was the white helmets. This week I want everyone's opinion on this for sure. So be ready to answer. Simply because it was a big topic of discussion for LaFleur. Was kind of like I vomit every time that I get asked this question. So I'm going to ask the question, not to him, but to you guys. Who's your wide receiver one in Green Bay? Who is it? I would love to hear what everyone thinks on this because I have my own thoughts. I am in the process of going, very, very in depth on kind of a written piece on the Packers receiver room, which I think will be good to kind of release on Monday after that second preseason game, so we can kind of get some more looks at some of the young guys like Dubose and Heath and even Melton. Right, to just kind of like, okay, what's this room going to look like? What does everybody need to work on? So drop in the comments who your receiver one is right now. I will reveal mine for sure, but I want to hear from you guys first because I'm really, really excited to find out. Just because I want everybody's thoughts on like what the wide receiver one should be bringing perhaps to the team and just how you guys perceive it. Is it based on your own evaluation? Is it based on what the team is showing you, what Jordan shows you, right? All of this stuff. So I would love to know. Coach Hewlin, this is why I like this, because Coach will bring that perspective that I like on certain things where it's just, yeah, he says Dobbs just because of love, trust in him. So yeah, so this is a good way to paint, how Love might view wide receiver one, right? Because I think Dobbs has become Love's go-to guy in a lot of situations. So Jordan Love, if he had to say, might say Dontavian Wicks, right? Or not Wicks, Romeo Dobbs. Sorry, I see a lot of Wicks in the comments, but yeah, maybe Love would probably say Romeo Dobbs because like, yeah, I trust that guy. We've got a lot, of reps in. I've got the most experience with him. I'm on the same page the most with him. Like that Makes a lot of sense. Touches wise, I'd say Reed. Okay. I mean, Reed's going to probably get a lot of looks in the reverse stuff and the jet sweep stuff, and as well in the red zone, he gets a lot of looks, but he gets plenty deep down the field, short, intermediate. Like, he's going to be all over the place because he's got enough speed down the field. Janelle and Mike Berry are both in on Dontavian Wicks. Pete is in on Dobbs as well because of the love trust. It's hard to get away from that for sure. Janelle says is based on pure hope. Hey, projections got to be part of this, especially when they're young players too, right? Because I think that, you're looking at these guys in year 3 for Dobbs and Watson, and that's a year where you should see a jump, right? At the very least, obviously receivers break out a little bit sooner now than they used to, but year 3 is still a good point to be kind of looking for that launching point for them. And then Wicks and Reed are in year 2. So, there's still a lot of projection that I think you can go on with these guys. Prince Capsaicin, I was hoping somebody was going to say Watson just because this is a good point. If they focus on him, it opens up everything else. If they don't, it could be a dagger every reception. And it's nice to have Watson out there to create a lot of vertical stretch when you're playing against defenses, right? When you have a guy who can just book it down there and can really, really stretch things out vertically to open up stuff, especially on dagger concepts, flood concepts, levels concepts, all of that stuff that allows you to run those. I forget what, some people call them. I forget what it is, but like those deep over routes, the deep crossers, right? Not the drag routes, but the deep crossers. It's nice to have somebody who is stretching linebackers or corners or safeties or maybe the nickel position, even the overhang deeper down the field that opens stuff up underneath. And that having that guy who can, kind of be like, yeah, if you're going to put guys on an island, you better be careful for Watson, defeating a guy down the field. There is definitely some merit to that as well. So I'm glad that somebody said Watson. So for me, I think I'll just preface this way. For me, the wide receiver 1 to me has to be able to run the full route tree, be placed in a position where they can win as the X, have success against man coverage, zone coverage, and be potentially as close to a 2.5 to 3 phase threat and level threat in an offense. Right. So I'll do it this way. Jamar Chase, if you think about him, he is a surefire 3-level, 3-phase threat. When you think about him, he can win quick on a lot of the short routes. He's got the speed to win on deep routes. He's got the twitch, the refinement to win on the intermediate stuff. And he, he can win at the catch point, he can win pre-catch, and he can win after the catch, right? So he's winning in 3 phases. He can win at all 3 levels. CeeDee Lamb, kind of the similar thing. Brandon Ayuk, very similar thing. Garrett Wilson, I think, actually does have all of those things. He just hasn't had the quarterback yet. So it's players like that. And so I don't know, and this is part of the piece, unfortunately, and I'm kind of spoiling some of it, but I do think the Packers have guys who can get there. I don't think Watson's going to ever be the guy who is masterfully running comeback, dig routes, all of that stuff. He's not going to be that guy. However, he can kind of be a 3-level threat because you can run him on the drag stuff, you can run him on the deep crossers, and he can obviously go vertical down the field. So there are ways for him to affect 3 levels. I just don't think he's going to affect all 3 phases, right? So to me, that's where, the phase of route running to create separation, he's probably not going to have that. But the speed to create separation, maybe you can kind of push that into the equation of like that's maybe your 3-phase threat. He's a threat after the catch. He's growing at the catch point for sure. He's got a better handle on tracking the ball and how to elevate and when to elevate. So he's getting there. So I don't hate that answer at all. Dobbs, I think, has shown the mastery of the catch point. He is figuring out how to run routes. He's getting there. He's getting a lot better at it. I still think there is some still hesitation in terms of how he runs stuff, but I think he's getting more comfortable, which is good for him. As far as 3 levels, I think he can be a 3-level guy. He just, to me, isn't always the perfect X receiver who does it all really well against man coverage. I still think there are some things to work on in terms of how he handles man, but zone coverage, he's got the chemistry, which helps. But all that stuff, all that to say, I think after the catch, he's fine player. Pre-catch, he's pretty good. He's more in that 2 to 2.25, perhaps, if you're doing it on a point scale. And as far as 3-level threat, I think he's pretty close there as well. But I think Reed has a really good argument because he actually, I think, isn't given as much credit as to how he plays and how he played at Michigan State, where, yes, he can be in the slot and he can be a really, really good player from there. But I do think there is some merit to playing him at the Z a little bit. I don't think Green Bay is going to ever have to do that because they have, Dobbs and Wicks. We'll see. Injuries obviously can change that. But I do think Reed also has the potential to be, at the very least, a 2-level, 3-phase player, which is really good. But my wide receiver one I'm going to put is Dontavian Wicks, just personally because I think his success against man, his success against zone coverage, he's got better yards after catch ability than given credit for at times. He is showing so much progress and so much consistency in terms of how he attacks the catch point. He's not off balance. He shields himself from defenders really well, just like Dobbs does. There's no doubt Dobbs does the same thing. But I do think the footwork and the plan of attack and hesitation, the crisp, nature of the routes that he runs, and just the amount of deception he can throw in there with his head and shoulders, with his footwork, I think he's shown that. And I think he's shown even at Virginia, and they didn't give him a lot of looks down the field, but obviously you saw him in the preseason game winning down the field. I think he can be 3-level, 3-phase player. The one phase that I think isn't his best is going to be after the catch, of course. But I do think Dontavian Wicks, to me at least, is the Packers' best hope of getting to 3-level, 3-phase winner, man coverage, ace, guy who can go get the wins against, potentially drawing coverage. But the good news is it probably doesn't matter who wide receiver one is, right? Just because of the threat that Watson provides, right? That Prince Capsaicin outlines. Obviously, Janelle and Mike are kind of going, potentially, I don't know if Mike is, on projection and what we've seen to this point when Wicks is on the field and what he can do when he grows. Dobbs has the trust of Love, which is a big deal for sure. And Reed is just kind of a versatile weapon, so they all have stuff. And I think that having all four is a really nice luxury to have. So I think so. Yeah, Dobbs. I'll have to go back to the 49er game. To me, against the Dallas Cowboys, it was really schemed to perfection, and he just happened to be the guy reaping the benefits of it. Personally, I don't think there was anything in that Dallas game where I went, "Wow, that's high-level receiver play." I know everybody talking about him shaking the corner because the corner is anticipating him running the deep crosser, and so LaFleur found that wrinkle and goes, "Yeah, they're going to commit to this. Let's run this type of route." Obviously, he gives it to Dobbs, which is a good sign of trust there. But I do think there are others on the team who could have succeeded in that role. Now, if you're talking more about San Francisco, I'm going to circle back on that game. I just something about games when you get eliminated, I don't like watching them as much. But I will definitely circle back to that to make sure I'm not missing a whole lot with Dobbs. But Dobbs has, again, to my point, Dobbs, and to your point as well, Dobbs, his rookie year, you could tell, and I've probably said this a million times on here, but I'll cover it again. Dobbs, you can tell they're just in his rookie season where he is thinking about how many steps or how far he has to get with depth on a route to where he's thinking about it too much and he's not running full speed. He still obviously had moments where he's winning at the catch point and he's got good body control and adjustment skills, but it looked like the route tree was just kind of like work in progress because he was thinking a little bit too much. He is definitely thinking a lot less in year two, which is really good for him. So I think, when it comes down to it, if Love trusts him, then obviously, so goes 10, so goes this team for sure. So if Love's going to put the trust in him, it's going to be hard to kind of even push back. It's going to be hard to push back more and more if Dobbs continues to become that guy. because I think he is far surpassed my expectations for sure of him when he was drafted. Even I did think he was going to get more. I did remember writing something when the Dobbs, Watson, Toure trio were drafted, that Dobbs would get more reps at X than Watson would, which turned out to be true. But I do think, he plays with good physicality. He's got enough twitch there. I think it's just, to me, I'm very impressed with how Wicks already looks in terms of the route tree, especially on the intermediate stuff and just a plan of attack and man coverage. But it's hard to ignore for sure. But I will definitely circle back to Dobbs in the San Francisco game to see if I'm missing anything. So yeah. All right. Well, that was good. Glad we got some votes in there to see what everybody was thinking on that. So that was Pulse of the Fan Base this week. What do I think? What do I think Wick's height and weight are? Gosh, I should know this because of videos on him, but let me think here. Wicks, I would imagine. Oh no, Wicks is like 6'2", 202, or 6'1" and 3/4, 202, something like that. Let me check. I haven't looked it up yet. Okay. Let me see here. Let me see. So this is what I see for the RAS. Obviously, this is pre-draft, right? So, okay, I was pretty close. I said 6'1" and 3/4, 202. I was pretty close. It was 205. But I do think, this is pro day numbers. What about, well, that's weird. What an insane discrepancy. Why is there height discrepancy on this? 6'01.6" and 6'01.3"? All right. We need a tiebreaker. Is there not another one here? Ah, darn it. Okay. I thought 6'01.6" is correct. But Kentley Platt is, hold on. I'm going to go in a different window and make sure this is correct. I'm going to the site itself to see if that's what it has. He does look bigger this year. I know, especially the off-season training stuff that they were showing videos of him, he definitely looked bigger. Let's see. Let me see here. Yeah, Wicks 6'1" and 3/8, 206. So yeah, he's probably he could be around 215 this year for sure, Coach. I think that's very possible. He looked, especially when he was in those training videos, he looked like he would, packed on about 10 more, which is great. So yeah, he definitely could be 215. But 6'1" and 3/8. Okay. Yeah, I was decently close. I must have remembered the one that Jacob Morley shared here, where I'm getting the 6'01.6, but maybe that's right. I don't know. I see the 6'01.3, but man, I just remembered Wicks in 21 was so good. Gosh, he was so good. He's such a problem too. And look at the suddenness after the catch, man. Just make people miss. Get out of here. God, it looks like 17, doesn't it? It looks like 1.7. Oh, gosh. I love the hezzy on the fade. And look at him elevate the catch point, too. Gosh darn, we got ourselves into a mess here, but I love this. This is what I'm talking about with Wicks at the catch point. And this will obviously, I'm doing a whole film room on him, on his rookie season. But this is what I'm talking about, the catch point. So when you elevate like this at the catch point, one, you're giving yourself, a lot of areas to, I'm trying to remember how Matt Waldman said this, but it's a great point. You have so many options in terms of your control here because you're attacking, straight up rather than leaning back or leaning forward to the point where you don't have a lot of options to shield yourself when you're attacking, when you're leaning. But he's elevating with good technique and he's straight up so he can turn and shield his way toward the sideline if he wants to on this play, right, when he catches the football. Or, he can has an option to land straight down if he wants to, like he does here. And it just look at the control he's landing with when he secures this ball. Like that is, gosh, it's top tier stuff, man. And not even that, just what he's doing here to is just make sure he's pushing this defender's leverage further inside so he can, right there with that jab, boom, the defender's trying to squat and you just push through with the hand. Like that's so good. Gosh, it's so good. Not to get on the Wicks train, but man, and this is what stinks. Let me see if I can find this. I'm going to try to find this for myself just to make myself feel better. Yeah. This is, hold on. Let's find that. Should we find that? Yeah, he doesn't get pushed around. Yeah, and I think that adding to his frame, like you mentioned, right, he's adding weight on, that's a big deal for him. To continue to work on it, if you're working against someone like Surtain, who's got plenty of mass on him at corner, especially, to have that is a big deal. Have to be able to use your hands at the top, right, and at the line of scrimmage and throughout this route stem, to gain any level of advantage you can. Yeah, let's find that. Can we find that? I'm going to bring up what Waldman said too, because I love what I'm telling you guys, you should follow him. I know, again, it's not even, I just feel like you should be. Just plugging how good he is at this stuff and how in depth he goes. Let me find that clip of Wicks. See, he does it. Okay. So let's pull this up, and then I'm going to pull up what Waldman said, because Waldman does a way better job of explaining it than I do. But obviously on this play, right, what you're seeing is a really nice job attacking it. First off, catch point timing, right, for a receiver, incredible when you can time your leap when the ball arrives to give you your best chance of winning at the catch point, which he, of course, does there. But then, of course, it's right after this that I think is the best thing that he does. Look at where he's tucking the ball. It's away from the defender perfectly, right? And he's landing in a controlled manner and just pulling the ball away effortlessly. So, I think this is the one. Is that the one? Yeah, okay. So I want to talk about this because it was really good. But Waldman says to get specific, Wicks executed an effective jump up and through, so he's leaping vertically without an exaggerated lean, which is what he's talking about here. His hands are in a tight position to address the ball, right? Appropriate overhand attack, maximize length of his arms versus coverage, and then, of course, that, as I mentioned, the quick pullback away from the defender. And what he's talking about is this. Right, one of the most underrated aspects of the jump up and through is the jump straight up, right, which is what he's talking about. Many highly touted wide receivers in college lean back, expose their chest to the defender, create a scenario where they abandon their body control options, right? Because if you're leaning back, essentially what you're doing when you're leaning back is you have sort of one way to land, and you know what that landing is. And so that is reducing your options to shield the ball, come down under control, all of those things. And so, when you can do this, right, and then as well, he talks about it, sometimes that lean is rooted in lackluster timing, right, leaping too late. And you can tell that Wicks timed that perfectly when the ball arrived. So just very, it seems very simple, right? It seems like, simple, time it at the catch point. But what that timing at the catch point and that technique of catching the football give you as a receiver is a big deal. And I think just Matt perfectly describes what all of that means just for the single rep like this in 1v1 in the red zone. So hope you guys got a little something out of that. I always do when Waldman kind of talks about the ins and outs of receiver play, tight end play, running back, even QB play. Definitely worth a follow. Definitely worth your time to check him out. So, yeah, it's some of those things with Wicks that made me so excited because I think he's just got a good feel after the catch, even though he's not super dynamic. That type of suddenness, the stop-start, is really effective in space. It was clearly effective at Virginia. Maybe a little less so, of course, in the NFL when you have better athletes at every position, but it's good enough to be sudden enough in certain moments. So that's where I'm landing on Wicks. But hopefully that was a great discussion. I'm glad we can get into more receiver play on here, because that's just, if you're coming here for anything, I know there's a lot of you coming here for Packers, but if you're coming here for anything, hopefully you have a wide receiver enthusiast in your midst here. So to kind of give you that type of inside look. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I had too much else. So it's really dependent on you guys. And obviously we're going to have longer shows. I think in season would be my guess, and during draft season, of course. So we're kind of on that cusp of where, we can only talk about so much every week. And I know we haven't really talked at all, I guess, since the preseason game. Went through it a couple times. I'll give a few thoughts on that. If Q&A disrupts, I don't really care. This is for you guys for sure. But I will throw in some preseason thoughts here, of course, from game one. Other than, of course, Evan Williams, who was just truly excellent in terms of coverage responsibilities, showing off the versatility of playing in the box. They had him on the back end, right? Like, that is, he was really good in space. He's such a controlled tackler. I thought Kalen King looked comfortable at nickel, and Coach Hewlin, I know you asked that on the King video, which I didn't respond to yet, but I'm going to on that. But I think King can play really well at nickel, and I think if they're going to give him, zone looks and press looks, and not really, off coverage match where he's going to have to run with a lot of guys in man coverage where he can't get hands on, I think it's going to be fine with him in the slot. And I think that gives you, it should give you a little more confidence in him, I think. But yeah, Wicks jumping through the defender. Yeah, up and through, right? Like, it is so much about, where your controlling your momentum, especially in moments like that at receiver, right? If you can control your momentum and can control, your gears, when you have to break out top gear, when you can, gear down really quickly, like, all that stuff matters in milliseconds even. And just to see Wicks doing that with, like, attacking up and through, timing it with the hands, with a football that's coming in, pretty quickly, right, in red zone, just really, I think, emphasizes how good he can be. And that rep can show you, I think, a little bit of why, to me, he's got that wide receiver one potential in him for sure. So, but yeah, other preseason thoughts. I know Monk did a nice job in run blocking. I think, he's got some work to do, I think, with hand placement and just where he's, generating that initial strike. I think needs to be a little cleaner. I think Sean Ryan did a nice job. He still looks a little bit, he needs to keep his feet moving at center when he was there. I think he got himself kind of caught, with his feet in the mud a little bit, I would say, in pass protection, where he kind of let guys around on a couple instances, which is not the best, but I know it's a new position. He's learning that, but I thought he did a solid job. Obviously, Pratt did really well, I think, for what he was asked for, and I think Clifford did decent bouncing back. And I think, from the early camp stuff where Clifford was struggling, I think he's doing a little bit better now. Clifford definitely has that Minshew in him, for sure, which is great, but I do think Pratt's got a little bit more in the tank, but I think you have to keep all three of them. Just because of their quarterbacks, and you never know when you're going to need one or both of them to finish a game or start a game. So it's nice to have all three. I think, what else? I think Emmanuel Wilson I think Emmanuel Wilson's probably even more tailor-made. He can't, obviously, zone, he's still good versus zone, or not versus, wow. Good in zone concepts as a runner, but when you can let him press the line of scrimmage and bounce runs out, he's got enough acceleration for those type of plays. Pete S., how many O-line players would you keep on the roster? Okay. I'm still iffy on whether or not I'd keep Dillard, but it seems like the Packers might be keeping him no matter what I think. Let's see. When it comes to, so obviously the 5 starters, right, including Morgan, are all making it. After that, I don't think I'd keep Glover on the roster personally, even though he was a draft pick. I don't think he's shown enough, and collegiately and to this point, where anyone's going to scoop him up. But if Green Bay, it doesn't matter what I think. If Green Bay thinks that someone might scoop him up, they're going to keep him on. Obviously, you're going to keep Monk. I think you're going to keep Ryan. Newman's a bit of a toss-up. I would keep at least 9 personally on the roster. I think having 9 is really beneficial to you, especially when you're still a young group, and especially as you're working more guys to be positionally flexible. You're still going to have those guys that you go, yeah, he's plugging in as a backup here. Like, this is his spot, right? As a backup, like, this is where he's playing. So you have to have still those guys. So I wouldn't keep any less than 9 personally. What about you, Pete? How many would you keep? Or who's ever in here, how many would y'all keep? I think it's at least 9 for me. Coach asked, does Ryan look tired to you on drives? He's a road grader. Yeah, I think there are times where I think, you look at him and you go, that's not the greatest athlete on planet Earth playing offensive line. But I still think I don't know if it's just kind of like he's so used to pass protection being easy for him in a lot of aspects where he didn't have to move his feet a whole lot. But it just seems like there are lapses in pass pro where he's got to move his feet a little better. But maybe, there is talk of like conditioning, right, issues with some guys, and LaFleur has brought that up. So maybe it's possible that Ryan's one of the guys who just condition wise is just not, up to snuff in terms of what you need to be for playing, 60 minutes of football on any given Sunday. So that could be part of it. I still think he's still got, and he's proving that he's got some value in him in terms of potential positional flexibility. But we'll see. There are times where the feet are not moving very, they're not crisp. They're not, you can tell it's kind of more heavy-footed than not. And so, yeah, maybe it is a conditioning thing with him. It's very possible. Wouldn't rule it out. Coach Hewlin says 10 for sure O-line. I'd be fine with 10 as well. Brian, what's going on? We're going to have you on a show here at some point. Obviously when draft season comes around, but asking what 2025 corner do I prefer for Green Bay? Who do I prefer? Obviously I prefer Will Johnson from Michigan, but I don't think that's going to be in the cards, assuming that the Green Bay gets as far as at least, the bare minimum of what we think they will. Hunter and Morrison are probably out of the question as well, assuming they all have good years. But as far as like not those top 3, I know I gave them Takario Davis in a mock. Wouldn't be mad at that. I like Jabbar Muhammad for them for sure. I'm excited to see how he does at Oregon. And I think Denzel Burke, even though Denzel Burke might not be, I don't know, Brian, you may have numbers on this. I don't know how athletic Denzel Burke is going to be for Green Bay to be like, yes, he's an elite athlete out of this world. But he seems he's just like a genuinely good player who I think provide a lot. So I'd be fine with Burke or Muhammad especially. Though I think Davis has plenty of size and instincts. If they want guys who can run a little bit more, I'd love to have a guy who's competitive as Muhammad and as sound as Burke. Either one of those guys for Green Bay. 10 for sure. Yeah, I'm good to go whenever. Just okay. Brian, it might be throwing some like early live show on the draft and stuff for prospects soon. So I'll hit you up on that. Prince Capsaicin says 9 initially, and the practice squad will be O-line heavy. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think you can get at least a couple guys, right? I know Telford, Tenuta, Caleb Jones, who else? Who else am I thinking of? Yeah, obviously Glover could be a guy that's on there, right? I mentioned Tenuta and Jones, Telford, Donovan Jennings Probably another guy who's going to be on the practice squad, of course. So yeah, they could have a lot of practice squad guys. That's a good point. I think there's at least, you kind of look at 4, maybe probably 5 guys that you go, yeah, they could be on the practice squad, and I makes a lot of sense. So I think, yeah, having 14 to 15 players in terms of roster plus practice squad is a good deal with the offensive line. Pete says 9 to 10 seems realistic. It should cover needs. Yeah, I think it's got to be at least 9. I think it seems like everybody, at least in chat, is on board with that. I think most of the projections, I imagine, have at least 9 on the offensive line, just because, again, it's important. There's a lot of positions on the offensive line, right, that you kind of have to take care of. So, yeah, I'm not going to be upset if they take 10. Not at all. Not at all. Brian says Burke was 5'11", 193 in the spring. Okay, so not the biggest, but what was Jair? Let's see. What was Jair? Jair was 5'10" and a quarter, 196. So pretty close there. Obviously, 5'10" and a quarter was pretty small height-wise for Goody to go that. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So that was, something that was a little bit outside the kind of presumed threshold. But, I mean, the rest of it is clearly top tier when it comes to corners. Not really as worried about the vert, but you can see the explosion, the quicks, and the speed. It was all there with Alexander. So similar, right? 5'11", if Burke is indeed 5'11", and 193, like that's right on par. So I'm good with Burke and Alexander. Just seems like it's going to be corner, offensive line, defensive line for the Packers in the first round again. It's going to be a pretty, but on the standard, what are we doing in the first? Is probably corner. It's probably O-line or D-line. Like they haven't strayed from that. It seems like that's just very much on par for them. And the D-line class is really good. So if they're going to take advantage, I will not be mad at that either. So Coach Hewlin says, do Oladapo and King both make the roster? That's a good question. Man. I think Oladapo does, just because I think he'll be at the very least the 5th safety, right? So if they're the 5th safety there for Oladapo, I think he's in. It's just a question of whether King does or not, I think. Man, because it's right now. So Jair, Stokes, Valentine, Nixon, right, are the 4. And then you have Valentine in the mix. Yeah, King's going to have to prove, I think, that he's valuable at nickel to make it. I think he can do that. I think he's got the skill set and he looks comfortable. Yeah, what the heck? They were draft picks. I'm going to say yes. Let's go yes. I think Oladapo's locked in no matter, how much he's going to play this year or not. But King would be a little more up in the air. King and Glover are probably the 2 draft picks that are up in the air a little more in terms of making the roster or not. But if King has 2 more strong games, especially if he's playing more nickel and they're like, yeah, he's clearly a good nickel player, and like maybe he's the guy that they're thinking of backing up Nixon, even though I would want Bullard in the mix for that as well. I'm gonna go yes. I think both do. I think it's probably gonna be tight, but I think King has maybe found his home, which is cool. Got to get eyes on Harrison. Is that how it's spelled? I will definitely get eyes on him. This weekend's going to be a big weekend for me. If probably even after this, just going down the line with a lot of guys, finishing up stuff before college season starts. So probably be on that pretty quick, Brian. So that'll be good. Appreciate you, Chris, for sticking around, hanging out. We're probably going to wrap up here in a couple minutes. So any final things anybody wants to throw down there in the chat, we'll cover those for sure, and then probably get out of here after that. So, Chris, appreciate you, of course, for dropping in and being the first to drop in, I believe, and said hello once we got rolling here. So that was great. Glad that was – it's 7:15. Nice. Really cool. Chris, always appreciate you dropping in when we begin. Prince Capsaicon says, do you think the big offensive tackle, offensive line draft class will churn rosters around the league, or was it not that significant? I know you said there were many needy teams out there. Yeah, there were. I think it's just, when you have it's a good question. I think it could churn rosters, and I think are you more saying, you can correct me, I'll take this maybe the two ways I'm trying to interpret it, but I think if you're saying like if it's going to churn the rosters in terms of like, veterans and guys, 4 or 5 year, 7, 8 year veterans are going to be potentially moving around more because of it, it's very possible. I think that there's obviously, of course, as we all know, there are going to be plenty of guys in the draft class along the offensive line that don't work out at all. But I do think, for teams that I'm trying to think of who went super O-line heavy in the drafts, but yeah, you could definitely see some teams that went more O-line heavy be moving on from guys, and you could see more veterans moving around. But I do think there's a chance that it was obviously a significant class, no matter how you slice it, no matter how it affects it. But I do think as well that teams, there's just a chance that, they're adding guys as well, but they know that, the quality of what their room looks like, they kind of, looked in the mirror and were like, yeah, we have to get better here. And so like, it's not going to really affect their entire room, right? It's just going to more elevate it. And they still have guys that are like, yeah, they're not very good, but like they're fine backups that were starters previously. So like I think it could churn starting rosters for sure. I don't think it's going to create, a lot of, revolving door guys who are going to bounce around to other teams, because O-line depth is still going to matter heavily. It's just, I think it's going to be nice for teams that, went O-line heavy in this draft, being like, okay, like these guys were starters, but the fact that they're backups now, it kind of, there's a little bit more confidence there in terms of like, okay, they can spot start. I don't want them starting all 17 games, but I feel like these are guys who can still stick on our roster, just not as starters. So I think it'll definitely, at least I assume this is what you're, correct me if I'm wrong, what you're asking exactly, but I do think starting rosters could definitely and depth charts could definitely get churned quite a bit based on, this draft class. But I do think that it's just, teams are going to be keeping a lot of offensive linemen for sure, no matter what, because it's so important. So Brian thinks King is going to make it. There you go. That's a good one. Add Jordan Aladokun and Jalen Husky to the watch list. Rock Taylor from Memphis. Great name, Rock Taylor. I will definitely add those guys, no doubt. Pittsburgh did go pretty heavy. So they went Fautanu, Frazier, and McCormick at the very least. Those three. They might have even done one more. Maybe they didn't do one more, but those three certainly I think will be. I mean, you're looking at 2 starters, right? And then another guy who could be a starter. So I think it just, what that does is it really elevates the room. And I think Pittsburgh the last couple of years have been doing a good job of adding offensive line to the point of, yes, they're probably going to let guys go. Certainly there are going to be guys that were on the roster that don't, but I think it further strengthens them in terms of their depth, because they're going to have guys who, as I mentioned already, that were starters that should be bench guys. It's just going to give them like, okay, we've got good depth at this spots. I do think it's going to be significant for Pittsburgh, because I think they did a really good job. I think most people would agree, right? Fautanu and Frazier, especially McCormick, who a lot of people, we've talking about McCormick a long time on this show, from way back in like February. So, I think it's going to be a big deal for Pittsburgh. I think it's going to be a big deal for the Chargers, even though it was just kind of alt for them like that. I think it's going to be a big deal there. I think it mattered that the Niners grabbed somebody like Pooney, because, they just needed help anywhere. Like, I do think we are probably, personally, I think we're going to look back at this class and look at it as a very significant one. That'll be for an interesting, pod/live show review in 2028 or something like that, or 2027. And maybe it wasn't, but I do think, like, especially, again, we talked about Jordan Morgan and Jacob Monk. the way we're talking about Jacob Monk, it could be a long-term starter thing. And I think it really could churn the top of the depth chart at least. So, yeah, that was a great question. Coach Heelan says, better question, does Emmanuel Wilson make the roster? Ooh. This is difficult because now what we're doing tonight is we're handing out a lot of roster spots tonight because I keep saying, yes, they're going to make it. And I've put 9 or 10 on the offensive line. So we're giving out a lot of roster spots tonight. And I don't know how many we're giving out. So maybe next week on this show, we'll kind of go through what my 53 would look like and what, where you're going to have to make kind of cuts to save other guys. So I would keep him because I think I agree that he has something we don't have. I think he's not quite the dynamic guy that Lloyd is, but I think there's a level of like reliability that he could provide, and he's still got some juice for a guy who's 220 something. So, but does he make it? Like, I would like him to make it. Does he make it? Man, I wish I knew how many roster spots I was giving out tonight. I gave out Oladapo and King both roster spots. That would likely mean, if I give him a roster spot, that likely means that I'm cutting one of Dubose and Heath, probably Ballantyne, and probably one of the tight ends that we only go 3 tight ends, which I think that they can go 3 tight ends the more I think about it. I don't think Ben Sims is going to get scooped up necessarily, but I think he should, because I think the running back room is by no means figured out, no means set in stone. It's not kind of like yes. It's not like something that comes across your desk, you stamp it and move on. It's kind of something that you're like, we better look at this. We better get a full kind of, I need to read through this whole thing. And so I think they need to know what the running back room is going to look like for 2025 and beyond. They got to get a good look at everybody. I think he should. Mike Wall liked what he saw from Monk in week 1. Yeah, I think the run game, there was plenty to like with Monk. I think there's work to do in pass protection, footwork, balance, hands. I think all of that in pass pro needs a little bit of refinement, which is why like a redshirt year where, goodness forbid, like I think, get some looks during game action. It'd be better to just kind of redshirt him. Obviously he's got to stay on the roster, but I think there's a lot of upside potential with Monk. So I'm excited for him. Good hit a bunch of doubles in this draft for sure. Yeah, this seemed like the first year where in Goody's tenure, I feel like, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I feel like it might be the first in Goody's tenure where it was kind of like, I'm not going to try to swing for the fence in the first. And I'm going to not sort of swing for the fence in the draft necessarily. There are some ceiling plays. Monk, Lloyd, Cooper are like the big ceiling plays. And I think you're obviously there's still development ceiling with Morgan, with Bullard, with Williams as well. But I do think it was kind of like a draft where it felt like they just really got some solid players to fill roles they needed to. So yeah, Jordan Morgan was a very fresh like swing where it was like, Van Ness, big ceiling, work to do. Wyatt was maybe less so, but Quay Walker, big swing on potential, right? Eric Stokes, big swing on potential. Jordan Love, big swing on potential, right? So, and Gary was a big swing on potential too, as was Savage, I think. So he did maybe deviate a little bit, and it certainly helps where there are positions like safety and offensive line and linebacker where you can find floors with some players, and you're like, it seems like it's an easier thing to do. But it definitely does seem like it was a little less of Goot like in a home run derby and more like Goot in a baseball game where he's like, I just need to adjust the approach, right? I'm going to hit some doubles to right center, right? I don't need to be swinging super hard. I'm going to let the pitcher do some of the work for me. So it did seem a little bit like that sort of draft for him, which I'm here for it, right? Brian says he's not sure on Quay and Edge's fit together. Yeah, it does seem like and this is, I think, Brian, why we were kind of, talking about linebacker a lot, where it was like, yeah, who's the Mike? It's kind of like, I think Gray could be a Mike, and Junior Colson could be a Mike, and maybe Peyton Wilson could be. And we had a lot of conversations and questions about that, where it was like, who fits with Quay? And it's like, I think edge could fit with Quay, but it's gonna take some time. And I think that's what we're gonna see this year. I think you're gonna see McDuffie and Eric Wilson probably get some plenty of playing time, while maybe Quay and edge are rotating a little bit more on terms of like the weak side run and chase linebacker. So yeah, it's a strange fit. You have to have somebody in that pairing who's going to be able to, one, attack at the right times to disrupt plays, but also have the eye discipline for slower developing stuff, especially in the run game, right? It's nice to have guys who can recover with a ton of speed and who have the instincts of Quay in coverage, where you can handle a lot of stuff in play action against play action looks. But at some point, you're going to have a dude who's sticking his nose in there. And Edgerrin Cooper has the length to get off blocks, and there are instances of him being instinctive. I think edge is going to have to be the one, if they ever play together, over a long period of time. Edge is going to have to be the guy who's like, yeah, I'm going to take the middle linebacker spot. I don't think Quay can do it. So we'll see. It's going to be an interesting development. Can't wait to see Edge out on the field. That's like the one I really want to see him out there, because I think he was. I'm gonna go look. I think Cooper was my highest graded Packer draft. I know this is super hard to see. I'm sorry. Let me see. Packers draft picks. I think. Yeah, Edgerrin Cooper was the only one who had a high second round for me. Bullard had a second round, but Cooper had a high second, fringe first round. So yeah, Cooper would have been my highest graded player that the Packers drafted. So yeah, I mean, I'm thrilled. I can't wait to see him play. Yeah, I think we kind of mentioned this, right? Yeah, that Xavier McKinney wearing the green dot made the most sense, for sure. So I like that. I'm glad that he's going to do that. So Joseph, what's going on? I said, missed much of the live stream. Drop by, say thanks for the video. Of course, we watch it later. Not counting on Quay at all. That's fair. That's fair. Thanks for dropping by, Joseph. Hope you get to enjoy the stream. Hope everybody enjoyed the Kalen King video today as well. So thanks, Joseph, for stopping by. Coach says, I agree, Quay would be a better at will. It just seems like he is. I think we kind of, and this was, I think, harped on pretty well when he was drafted, and even after the rookie season, it was kind of like, okay. And even last season, it was kind of to the point where, wow, like the instincts and coverage are really good. Like he could have had 5 picks last year. I know I said this probably 2 weeks ago as well, but it just feels like he's in a lot of good positions as the will backer to be like, yeah, I can clean up stuff on the perimeter. I can, take away windows and create turnovers. And like, that's where I think his sort of development and growth could be this year, is like he's hunting stuff down on the perimeter, and he has like 4 or 5 picks this year. Like that, I feel like is in his range of outcomes, which is exciting. But yes, he is not built to be a Mike linebacker. He just is not. And that's okay. Somebody's got to be a will linebacker. There's a lot of quality will linebackers out there. Heck, Patrick Queen just got paid a lot of money as a will linebacker who kind of needed the Mike linebacker and Roquan Smith to really kind of be like, okay, he can take care of that. I can do what I do best and unlock my full potential. So there's always Quay can be that guy. Also, Wald talked about Quay's bad habit of stepping back off the snap and step forward. That's a big deal. Yeah, that's a big deal. If you're not, Mike linebackers cannot do that stuff. That is for sure. You step backwards and you're late to a run fit, it's over. So that's a big deal. I'll have to watch Wall's stuff. I'm a little behind on his stuff. So, yeah. McKinney is super smart. He's a dynamic playmaker. He's got really all of it. So that was, it's a big deal to have McKinney on this defense right now. It is. Without him, I'd be a little more concerned than I am. I just feel like he's going to get a lot of people in the right position. So, yeah, Patrick Queen was not good. And the reason that I know that and am keeping tabs on that was certainly because somebody who was like, yeah, man, do you want to take him in the first instead of, a Jordan Love? Go ahead. Like, I'm not mad at that. So yeah, Patrick Queen was definitely somebody I was looking at for the Packers a lot when the 2020 draft was going. So it's nice to see him playing well. Do I think he, would I have paid him that much? Probably not. But I hope he does well in Pittsburgh. I do. I really do. Yeah, so that might do it for the evening. My voice is pretty much shot. There's no doubt. Some recovery time is in order for sure. Yeah, so I think we're gonna hop out of here. But this was good. I'm glad that we get to. The questions seem to always be, at their best once you get to minute 55, minute 10, 65, minute 70. So that's always good though. I like that. So yeah, we're gonna pop out of here. Thank you guys, all of you for who joined tonight, who commented, who threw out some thoughts on wide receiver one, who dropped some questions. Right, I know. Let's thank everybody real quick. Chris, Pete M, Prince Capsaicin, Coach Hewlin, Nostalgic, Michael Redden, Janelle, Mike Berry, who else? Brian, of course, dropping by to say hello, and of course Joseph, who stopped in, late to say hello as well. So I appreciate all of you jumping on. Hopefully, we keep the schedule going with Friday nights. We'll see. It seems like work has kind of pushed its way into Friday nights recently, just because of work is kind of doing some similar things at the same time, where weekends become an issue. So we'll see. Next week, maybe it might be like a Wednesday or a Thursday, as far as this show goes. So appreciate y'all staying flexible and showing up for those. That means a lot. But yeah, thank you guys so much to everybody who stopped by. Brian, I don't have a couple beers in the fridge, but I do have some high noons. So maybe we'll go that direction. But yeah, thank you guys. Maybe hit that thumbs up button there on the way out. And of course, if you are not subbed, but I think most of you are, if you are not, drop a sub there as well. Watch that Kalen King video if you have not as well. As far as the schedule in terms of other content this week, I'm hoping we got a little something on my guy Dontavian Wicks for Sunday or Monday. And I will have some stuff that is non-Packers on the channel, as there always is. So, if that is something you're looking into, great, awesome. Always appreciate views on that stuff. But I know you guys mostly are Packers, so there will still be a lot of that. So thank you guys so much. I will get out of here. Enjoy your Friday. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Yes, him, Dontavian Wicks. Heck yeah. But thank you guys so much. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy the game Sunday night. I'm sure PTA is going to have a lot of stuff during then. Maybe I'll hop in and join them if there's stuff going on. We'll see. But if I don't, see you in the comments of the videos, and see you next week on Weekly Cheddar. Of course, go Pack, go.